straightened out. So I'm going to spend some time on that. And in terms of what we really taught, I'm putting these subtitles, which is curative factors in terms of in redemptive grace. In other words, how do we apply grace to the human situation? I know we apply it in terms of very vague terms, like if you do, don't sin, you go to heaven. You know what I mean? We kind of use those vague kind of things. But I'm thinking in terms of applying grace to every human situation. And Jesus said, I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. That, in my mind, means to be a good father, to be a good mother, to be a good employer, to be happy, not to be on drugs, not to lie, not to steal, to have good relationship, to cultivate kindness, practice love, be a good neighbor. I mean, every area of human life grace touches. The question for us might be, how do we apply it? And how do we monitor it? And how do we help each other? The Bible used terms such as edification. I mean, that is something we use in sermons, we use in outlines, but we never really get down to what it really means. For example, James, which is a very practical book, James says, look, if you're religious, then you should visit those who are disadvantaged and those who are disabled and those who are locked away and those who are marginalized. James says, if you're not doing these things, then don't talk to me about being religious. So, James, for example, James in one point argues, say, look, if a rich man come into your audience, you go and you ask the poor man to get up out of his chair and you put the rich man in the chair. You know what I mean? You show partiality. So grace then has to do with the application in all areas of our life. So it is easier for us. I think we have more confidence in running up to the doctor and ask for a prescription for depression than we would going down to the preacher's office and say, why don't you help me to talk me out of this depression and help me to feel better about myself? So that's kind of where I'm looking at. What are the elements or the change factors? What are some of these things that you can highlight? So if I'm anxious, if I'm compulsive, if I'm flooded with bad thoughts, or if I am crippled by phobias, I can't go to sleep without turning the lights on. The light has to be on, How does grace apply to those things? So that's kind of more of a general kind of thing. I want to, so this is going to take us into a lot of different areas, and there are going to be some new terms that, that I want you to maybe take some notes on and look up these concepts on your own, and which I find might be helpful for you to do. In Romans 1 and verse 16, it says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation. The question for you today would be, what would that power look like in a broken life? How do you help someone who is broken? What's the application of that power? How do we make it meaningful in a practical way? To the application of that power. That to me is important. Now, Dr. Cornel West is a professor, African-American professor that I truly respect. I think he's a great guy in terms of, what he has done, in terms of his writing, working within the community. And one of the terms that he's quite often used is nihilism. And the definition is right in front of you anyway. But I want you to look it up on your own, maybe Google it or whatever, get a good dictionary, Webster's dictionary, and you look it up, basically. And the term nihilism is to be understood not as a philosophical doctrine, because it is used in most of the The dictionary it's probably used more in terms of a philosophy, which really interprets the young people, for example, who have said, look, the churches have no value, let's trample it, let's destroy it. Old folks don't know anything, let's destroy their values and their, it's a reaction to a way of life that they find to be useless. However, we're going to use it differently here. It is far more in the sense that it is speaking of lived experience of coping with a life of horrifying meaninglessness, hopelessness, and lovelessness. That's how Dr. West has used the term. And I think that this is very descriptive of the American society. And I'm assuming it is very descriptive among many of the Guyanese young people and their Jamaican young people, the Haitian young people. This is a pervasive situation. And I think you can see it also within the local churches as well, that there is a sense of meaninglessness. How do I know this? Look at how much money is being spent to incarcerate African-American men. Look at how much drugs are being sold on the streets. Look at how our young people's lives are being destroyed by, some of the activities. I look at the NFL and just about every player have massive tattoos all over their bodies, completely covered with tattoos. You look at our young people, you wonder why they wear pants when the underwear is completely out. Why don't you just wear the underwear? What's all that about? So there is a madness in our society. And that's something that we need to be concerned. The next phrase, the frightening result of all of this is a numbing detachment from others and a self-destructive disposition towards the world. I mean, did you remember how the Black Pride got started in the United States? Yes, I'm sure you do. But did you see the level of rage in people's hearts? Did you see what was happening on the street? That's the outcome of people on a path where they're saying that my life means something. It's saying, look, I am tired of the emptiness. I'm tired of the racist attitude. I'm tired of being discriminated. That people are literally willing to burn things down. I have a family member. I don't know if you recall, remember the guy during that march in New York City, the person who had thrown the bomb into the police car when the fire went up? That's my cousin. He's now in jail. He and a lady, they're both in jail. They're both he is from St. Vincent, my cousin. I'm just saying that people, and he is a lawyer. This guy is a lawyer with a good job. It was threw it all away because of what was happening. So there's this anger and this frustration that we're seeing, but it's all because of this emptiness that people feel. And so we have to understand that life without meaning, hope, and love breeds a cold-hearted, mean-spirited outlook that destroys both the individual and others. When that police officer stood there with his foot or his knee on that man's head, and just like nothing was happening, like he was, I don't know what it was going through his head. It tells you the kind of cold-heartedness that are in people's hearts. And then it means that there's something going on there. And that's what we are trying to understand. How do you fix that? That's the question. Remember, the underlying question is, how does grace, how you as a channel of grace, how do you make that application to help people who are in this situation? The next one, yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
it will be difficult to fix, even in this situation and any relating situation would be difficult to fix because of sometimes it is an issue compounded with an enable what you call a support system. Sometimes the support system will have to be removed in order for you to have space to examine or to make a fix, which that is the most difficult part of it. And even somebody, and this is no joke, but even somebody who is in an abusive situation, but remains in the abusive situation because of the support system that comes with the abusive situation, it would have been the same type of psychology, because even this police officer, he does, if I'm sure, as racist as he is, if he did not have a support system, it would be harder for him to do what he did. And I know that he has a support system because I went to visit a congregation in Tennessee, and that was predominantly a racist state, or a prejudiced state, if not racist, at least prejudiced. And one member of a church, we were having a conversation, and one member of a church said, well, the guy died because of drugs in his system. And I'm like, okay, so I've confirmed firsthand that this is not only a single person psychology, it is enabled by a system. So that's my thought on it, is that, sometimes we have to look at the system as to how to remove the system in order for the person to actually see where they can be assisted, or for us to analyze it and change it.
I am tempted to ask you, you said you've been preaching for 10 years.
Yeah.
What have you been preaching about?
I'm not sure if that's a genuine question or a low ball.
Well, I mean, you have said a lot of things, but what I was reading you to say is that the finished work of Christ is not able to do these things. Because as a preacher, then you have to say that you have the solution. This is the solution, and this is what you are committed to do, and this is what you have been doing. See, Dr. King, Dr. King,
that if we identify the problem, then it's better for us as preachers to do it. Right? You remember in the last part of the sentence about the church up, and I said members of the Church of Christ do believe that there is merit in what the police officer did. Now, when you have this, let
me say something.
We have the solution.
Yeah, but listen to me.
All right.
In the 1960s and 70s, within the churches of Christ, there were 2 bathrooms, one for white people and one for Black people. And if the black man was caught going into the bathroom, he would be punished. And if there was only one bathroom, the Black man wife would have to go in the bushes behind the church building in the 60s and the 70s. If there was a church bus, Church of Christ church bus, and the children, the bus drop at the back home first, and the children run and sat in the seat, and then white people came on to go into the same church, the Blacks had to get up and and the church bus, and give the white people the seat, and they had to stand. Going to the churches of Christ. Let me say to you that Keeble Marshall, I'm sure you've heard of his name, right? Keeble Marshall, right? You know him, right? You've read about him, Church of Christ preacher?
Yeah, I've heard about
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I have worked with some of the kids he used to take around to preach. And what he would do is when you take a lot of Black kids to white congregation to preach, invite them, he would tell the kids, you have to stand in the back. You wait for the right preacher to come down to get you. And then when you finish preaching, and they preach good, then the white ladies would come up to congratulate them, and he would teach them, you cannot look them, you have to stand in the back and you cannot look at them. You got to put your head down, and they would tell you you're nice and you reach your hand if they reach out and shake your hands. That was in the Church of Christ. Who were then preaching that the Baptists were so horrible and the Seventh Adventists were so horrible, they were all going to go to hell. But this was within the Churches of Christ. We're talking about the 60s and the 70s, not too far ago.
But Brother Davis,
yes,
there is a brother from Guyana that I'm very good friends with. He went to the United States. I think it was in North Carolina, and he went to a white congregation, and so he entered, and he says that he's a member of the church and he's visiting, all right, and they told him, I'm telling you in 2010, that he's at the wrong congregation, that he needs to go to the congregation somewhere, and they pointed him to a direction somewhere. This was in 2010, and that thing broke his man. He couldn't understand it because, we've heard a lot about racism and amongst the brethren and so on, but he experienced this from his sister, and he couldn't believe it. He could not believe it. And until now, he talks about it. And so he had to leave and find and I think the one that he went to was probably mixed a bit, right? But he had to leave there and go, and that was in 2010.
Oh, yeah, but the reason that I'm bringing, this discussion is really to highlight the fact that the church is silent. And that's what I really wanted to highlight for the brother, how silent the church is about these atrocities, and yet they're pondering about how great a gospel preachers they are, and they're sounding so well, singing their sermons, but at the same time, they are part of the system. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yes, because I want to just make another point. This young man from one of the islands in the Caribbean that was shot by the police in his room. I forgot his name.
Oh, I know, he's from St. Lucia.
Yes, from Amazon, right?
Yeah,
his name is Bottom.
Yeah, Bottom. Yes, Bottom. Yes. What I personally thought was that the congregation or the university or whoever he was with at that time, they should have done more as a body of Christ. They didn't really do anything, and he was with them, he mixed and meddled with them and so on. They did not really do anything.
My dear sister, the Churches of Christ was some of the people who were stoning Dr. King and you putting holes on Dr. King. I have white preachers to this day try to tell me, well, justifying why they did that at the time. You got to remember, and that's something that we don't seem to want to focus on, that the gospel is as powerful, but that's not a new phenomenon. And that's why I wanted to raise that to our brother, because Peter had the same problem. You understand?
That's what I was pointing out, that the system that enables these things, the real challenge that we have is that sometimes, and that's the point I was getting to, when I said I went into the States and met somebody from the church there and asked, what are y'all views on it? Because we can't do anything. Well, we can protest from Jamaica, of course, but what can we do? Y'all are in the system there. And, he's one of the leaders of the church. And he's like, well, the guy died because of whatever was in his system. So if those who are there are justifying it, even though we do have the truth, it does shed a light to me on
my brother, I'm saying to you, we do not have the truth. That's my point. We do not
don't
have the truth. No, we don't.
Ah,
If we had the truth, that's why I gave you the illustration. Remember
Mhm.
that the same missionaries during those times were the same people who brought the gospel to the Caribbean. It was the same people, their views had never changed.
right, right.
So
Mhm.
what I'm saying to you is this notion that we have the truth, we do not have the truth, because the truth is a transforming, it transforms lives.
Well,
It
I get your
changed
point.
people. You follow what I'm saying? Because
Your point.
Jesus said, except you be born again, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, I get your point.
Today, our sister from Guyana shared with us about 2010, but I'm telling you, in 2021, there are white churches and there are black churches.
I know. We are aware
You
of that.
understand?
Yes.
And,
I
and
visited a
they
white
pride
church.
themselves in that.
I visited
So,
a white church in a town recently, and which island you from, sis?
Guyana.
Guyana. Oh, all right. That's I don't know anywhere in Guyana for me to compare it. But the church, the black church, you could stay from the building of the black church
And throw
and
rock.
see the top of the building of the white church. They were that close.
Oh, no, they are. I am trying to tell
Yeah,
you.
That's
yeah,
the point.
yeah.
I said, why
Yes.
don't y'all
We are aware of that.
combine?
Yeah.
I said, why don't y'all combine, since y'all are so close, y'all are in basically the same neighborhood. So it takes us 5 minutes to drive there, because you gotta go up the road and go
I
around.
understand.
They said, well, the blacks have what you call a legacy, and they stay in their church because of their legacy. So it was a justifiable thing, because at the time the blacks had to fight real hard to have the right.
But my brother, it's not justifiable. My brother, it's not justifiable, because Jesus said he's broken down the middle wall of partition. Both sides are preaching the same thing. Both sides are preaching that God is no respecter of persons. I am saying that we are repeating stuff, but we are not practicing it. Let me give you another example. There are churches that probably their weekly contribution will probably be over 1,000, sometimes 100 grand a week. And there's another congregation right next door that cannot afford to purchase the communion. How do you explain the disparity in wealth? It's like God have poor children and God have rich children. Can you imagine a father who's going to see to it that a certain of his children have food, and then another group of children don't have food? What kind of father is that? In the book of Acts, it says that they shared, these people even sold their property and brought it to alleviate situations, social situations. And the point that I'm making is we have to, when we talk about treatment modality, where we are sending people for psychotropic drugs, people are doing all kinds of stuff and so on and so on, we have to begin to rethink the power of the gospel in transforming human lives and transforming society. The brother says it is a structural thing. Yes, it is a structural thing. But remember, the gospel breaks down the structure. That's why and that's even why Peter and those guys was even still resistant to.
Yes, we're not using it effectively then,
right.
Unfortunately.
And Paul had to stand up, to break down those walls, okay? And, one of the very interesting things for me is and sometimes that when I preach on this, I'll talk about this, people smile and they don't take me seriously. Think about this. On the day of Pentecost, Peter preached one of the most powerful sermons. I'll never forget that. Powerful sermon. And you know what he said in that sermon? He says, this is what Joel says, that God will pour out in the last days his spirit and all flesh. You couldn't beat a more powerful sermon that Peter preached on the day of Pentecost about that. Then God says, I want you to go over to Joppa. And there's a man over there called Cornelius. who is a righteous man. I want you to go and take the gospel to him. You know what Peter said? Peter said, nah, me not go. No, 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 no. As a matter of fact, in our language, he said, God, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? Don't you know who that man is? He's a Gentile. But yet, who preached the sermon on the day of Pentecost? You know what? God, through the Holy Spirit, overruled his limitations. And Jesus has said to him, when you change, remember Jesus said to Peter, when you change, when you turn, you go and feed my sheep. Sometimes the gospel takes a process for it to happen in the lives of people. And so even in Jamaica, you know, sometimes we focus on the United States, but I would assume that in Jamaica, you have the same kinds of issues. Maybe it might not be color, it might be the rich over the poor, or one political party over another political party, or one class or one type over another type, you know. And so we are very divisive people. And so we have to begin to work together. So, but remember the definition though, of nihilism is not just, it is not the new Black America, and I'm quoting this, and also in the Caribbean, but the first African encounter with the New World was an encounter with a distinct form of absurdity. Very absurd when you think about it. Think about a group of people coming into the new culture, the new world. Think about the shock of that. Think about what that meant for them. So, and I want to, Dr. West makes this statement, and I really like it. It says the initial Black struggle against denigration and devaluation in enslaving circumstances of the New World was in part his struggle against nihilism. In other words, what he's saying is that the first Africans who came to this country, that what they were up against was this nihilistic situation, the sense of hopelessness. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the sense of hopelessness that these people felt then? Lack of meaning in their lives that they struggle with on a daily basis. But here's the kicker. Here's something that we have to be pondering. And I don't know if you're going to agree with this statement or not, but think about it. The major enemy of Black survival in America has not been is neither oppression nor exploitation, but look at what it is, but rather the nihilistic threat. What is it? Loss of hope and the absence of meaning. You understand me? What you saw during the Black March on the streets was a loss of hope and an absence of meaning. And that was enough to fuel enough rage in people to start tearing buildings down. And this is the same kind of rage that I think will motivate us to change our way of life, to pull down the ugliness and the nastiness out of and allow God, the blood of Jesus, to wash us of these toxic emotions that so embodied our personality and has chained us to a path of destruction. And it is horrible. You know, for as long as hope remains and meaning is preserved, then there's a possibility for us to overcome. And I think that's what you were saying, brother. I think you didn't put it in those words, but that's exactly what you were saying. You got to once you get rid of the structural barriers, remember what John 4 and verse 4 says? It says, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. That's the message that we bring. That's the message that we package in our lives. that we help other individuals to package in their life. That's what's going to neutralize racism. That's what's going to neutralize greed and covetousness. That is what is going to cause us to be gentle, like the Good Samaritan. Remember the Good Samaritan who came by, and the effort he put in because he knew that was a human being to ensure he didn't pass by. And the reason that a lot of these things exist is because we pass by them. And where we insulate ourselves, what we call truth, doctrine, we insulate ourselves with those things, and we forget to do what we need to do. And that is to display and to model to the world what it truly means to be Christ-like. You know, Paul said, let this mind be in you as was also in Christ Jesus. So the self-fulfilling prophecy of I spelled that word wrong. That's supposed to be N-I. See the word that I highlight? It's supposed to be N-I. So please correct that for me, N-I. And the brother will teach me one of these days how to make the correction while I'm in the PowerPoint, but not right now. But that is supposed to be N-I-H-I-L-I-S-T-I-C. Okay? Thread is that without hope, there can be no future. And without meaning, there can be no struggle. The apostles died because there was a struggle, but they were able to keep hope alive. And so I want to really highlight, and you may not like this, but I want to highlight our forefathers and our foremothers, what they went through for us to be here today. That we are standing today on their sacrifices. Whether you're in the Caribbean or you are in America as a Black person, don't you ever forget that you are here because of your forefathers and your foremothers. So let's talk a little. The genius of our Black forefathers and our Black foremothers was to create powerful buffers. Please listen, powerful buffers to ward off the nihilistic threat. That is, to ward off hopelessness, meaninglessness, to ward those things off, to equip Black folks with a cultural armor. Can you imagine being in a situation where you are considered not human and have to work on plantation day and night, year after year, and survive? They did that, and you are here today. We as young people, well, I'm not young now, but most of our young people forget. We forget how we got here. But I don't want you to ever forget. So I will keep bringing it up. These are to break the demons of hopelessness.
Oh, excuse me, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Time.
I know, right? When things start getting good, you all chase me. That's all right.
No, not necessarily.
That's true.
Some of us may have another class.
I know. They chase me. They chase me. That's all right.
No, if I was chasing you, I would have told you from 750.
All right. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But we will take our time and we will go through these things very slow because it's really important that we get it.
Yes.
And I want us to be, because gratitude and gratefulness is to be able to look back in your past and be able to say thank you. And too many of us don't thank our Black forefathers. And you know what you're going to tell me? Well, they weren't Christians. They weren't part of the Church of Christ. But the reason you're in the Church of Christ is because they were able to beat these things back and survive. So you can come to where you are today. So thank you for the day. God bless. And we will hammer through it next week.
One more
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
Brother Carlos.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Disagree with me. But
I
no
don't
ask-
disagree with you.
No, I said disagree with me, but no ask me how me I preach so long. You understand? Disagree with me. Even if I'm a secular Adventist or a Baptist, disagree with me when I ask me when I preach. Say,
Well,
hold.
but I have to ask you because this is what we're about.
Of
We're
course.
about to know.
Yeah,
Yeah, man,
You can ask
but
me.
We want to effect change by the things we
I'm here
say.
to change. We're in therapy. This is a big therapeutic
in
group.
Jamaican culture is if I ask a preacher, if I disagree with a preacher, but in showing my disagreement, I ask him, brother, you are preaching 10 years, why you are preaching so long? I tell him, says he then can't preach or him is an idiot. No, we not like that.
We know. Oh, but remember, change can only occur when the emotions are being touched.